the Emperor Pilaf Saga. For many old school Dragon Ball fans, this was their real starting point into Dragon Ball as a franchise itself. This is where they met Bulma, this is where they met Goku. Even for myself, this is one of the most important arcs in anime history because, personally, I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan. Although I personally started with watching Dragon Ball Z when it originally aired on TV back in the day with my brother, I soon after jumped into OG Dragon Ball after I learned that this was a prequel to Dragon Ball Z. In today's video, I will be going over the Pilaf Saga of Dragon Ball and discussing the good things and the bad things this saga has to give, in my personal opinion. I plan to turn this into a series where I go over each and every arc across the legendary story of Dragon Ball to give my opinion about each and every single one of them. I plan to go all the way from Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z to Dragon Ball GT and Dragon Ball Super. I might even include the movies and Dragon Ball Heroes content too if people would want to see that in the future. Now, I won't be giving these sagas any type of numerical rating or anything like that. I just want to discuss my personal opinions on the good aspects of the saga as well as the bad aspects of the saga, once again in my personal opinions. These videos are made to open up the topic for discussion in the comment section down below, so be sure to jump in and let me know your opinions on today's video. For the sake of ripping off the band-aids first, let's start by talking about the things I found less good about the Pilaf Saga. Keep in mind that this is purely my personal take and opinion regarding this saga. None of these are meant as factual, constructive criticisms of the series, it's really just my opinion. So don't be upset if I say something you disagree with, your opinion is just as valid as mine is. Remember what I always say, don't let some dumbass on the internet tell you what you can and cannot like about something, be sure to decide that for yourself. But the first and for me personally biggest bad quote-unquote part of the Pilaf Saga is that you can definitely notice that Toriyama did not have a full roadmap for the story at this point in time. The way the story kind of just hops from one thing into another shows that he was really just feeling the flow of where the story would eventually bring him. But if I'm being totally honest here, I can't just sit here and rip on the fact that the very first saga of Dragon Ball lacked some direction here and there. It is the first saga for a reason, and expecting a mangaka to have an entire 520 plus chapter manga all planned out from chapter 1, that would just be a ridiculous thing to just assume anyone would really do. Dragon Ball in its early days is noticeably similar to Dr. Slump with its gag setting and more episodic style of storytelling. Every episode tends to have its own contained story with some connection to the main plot in some cases. This makes for a good bridge into my second point of dislike for this saga. Even though it is called the Emperor Pilaf Saga, Emperor Pilaf does not really seem to lead the saga in the slightest. This is explainable though through the fact that this is a Funimation dub-only naming scheme, like Funimation gave it the name the Pilaf Saga. In the original Japanese naming of the sagas, the first Dragon Ball saga is often called the Hunt for the Dragon Ball Saga or the Son Goku Saga. The only place the saga is commonly referred to as the Emperor Pilaf Saga is the Funimation dub release. Me personally being someone who first experienced Dragon Ball through the Funimation dub, was always confused why the first saga was referred to online as the Pilaf Saga, while Pilaf himself does not even show up for like half the saga. The first episode is all about Goku meeting Bulma, the second episode is actually all about Pilaf, so he does get a good introduction. The third episode is all about meeting Roshi, the fourth episode centers around Oolong, the fifth episode introduces Yamcha and Puar, the sixth episode is some plot advancement and some gag humor. Like, I don't want to call it a filler episode, but it's not really super conductive to the actual plot. The seventh episode is about the Ox King and Chi-Chi, the eighth episode is about the very first Kamehameha wave, the ninth episode centers around Boss Rabbit, the 10th episode goes back to the race for the Dragon Ball plot, the 11th episode is about revealing Shenron, the 12th episode is about fighting for the wish on Shenron, and the 13th episode is all about the final battle between our gang and the Pilaf gang. So all in all, Pilaf is a leading role in less than half of these episodes in his own saga. This is more so an issue I personally had due to Funimation doing stuff they did not really need to do. Spoiler, they tend to do that stuff a lot, but it does still somehow make the saga slightly less enjoyable for me for some reason, but honestly it's a very minor personal annoyance that really doesn't matter in the larger scheme of things. Another thing that was very much a relic from Toriyama's work on Dr. Slump and was very common in the 80s and 90s in general is the little bit of a perverted sense of humor. For me personally, this was also also a bit of a downer for this saga and Dragon Ball in general. I never really was a fan of the pervy humor in the first place, but I found it especially annoying in Dragon Ball. But the more I think about it, I can't really be too harsh on this type of humor in the show. If I just take into consideration that Toriyama was originally a gag manga author and the time period Dragon Ball was concocted in being the 80s and the 90s, I can't really blame the show for having that type of humor. Pretty much every show had that type of humor in it in some fashion back in those days. And to be perfectly fair, it did tone down quite a bit in the later parts of Dragon Ball. So I really can't hate on this specific aspect of the saga too much. Honestly, most of the dislike points I have on this saga are more so personal, like minor annoyances, than things I actually really just dislike about this saga that would make it suck for me. It's just very clear that the Pilaf Saga focuses much more on comedy than the actual serious life or death threats the later Dragon Ball sagas bring to the table. But now that I have shared my dislikes with the saga, let's talk about some of the things I love about the Pilaf Saga in general. The biggest thing I love and appreciate about the saga is the fact that even with the minor dislikes I have on this saga, it is still the very first time we get to meet Goku and all of his original band of friends. I think it is very safe to say that every single person who watches my channel, or just even this video, loves Goku and all of Dragon Ball. If Toriyama never thought about this little blue man called Pilaf, we may have never met Goku in the way that we did. This being the very first saga of Dragon Ball will always give it huge amounts of brownie points to me at least. Me being a total nostalgia whore will always act like a boomer and defend the Pilaf Saga for being the very first time we get to meet Goku, Bulma, Yamcha, Roshi and many more characters. You Dragon Ball Super kids who just wouldn't understand. Back in my day we had Goku fighting a walking blueberry and sending a rabbit to the moon. And yes, him sending a rabbit to the moon is not a joke. See episode 9 for further context. Even though the story progression was not what you would call stellar, the fun side quest Goku and the gang went on did add some good funny moments to the series. And consequently introduced one of the most broken characters in Dragon Ball with Boss Rabbit. Like no joke, he is pretty strong if you just take his ability for granted. Another thing I just really like about this saga is that we got to meet the Dragon Crew and they were actually useful. Goku meeting Yamcha and Yamcha being an actual capable strong fighter is something I will always respect. Yamcha tends to get a lot of hate, but he was such a cool guy in the original Dragon Ball series. Characters like Puar and Oolong being useful with their transformations is also something I miss in more modern iterations of Dragon Ball. Nowadays, it's all about strong guys fighting even stronger guys with even stronger guys going next. Like, it's really simplistic in a way. But back in the early sagas of Dragon Ball, like the Pilaf Saga for example, trickery and special abilities were a much more useful tactic and they were applied pretty well. But the coolest moment has to be the original Kamehameha Roshi used to put out the fire on Mount Frypan. Seeing this old skinny man just completely roid out and just firing a massive energy wave that obliterated an entire mountain was just the coolest thing ever back in the day. This was also the first time the concept of an outward ki attack was really introduced into the series. And the last topic I want to cover when it comes to the positive points for the Pilaf Saga is that we got some amazing foreshadowing that Goku might not be from our world. Now obviously Toriyama had not thought up the fact that Goku was a Saiyan warrior sent to Earth to eliminate all life on the planet. At least I don't think so. Correct me if I'm wrong about Toriyama having the plan of Goku being a Saiyan all along, but I'm fairly confident he did not have that all planned out at the time of writing Dragon Ball. Originally Goku was based on the Chinese legend surrounding Sun Wukong, otherwise referred to as the Monkey King. Both Goku's monkey-like tail and his power pole are all direct references to this Chinese legend. Dragon Ball is after all heavily based on Chinese legends and mythology all over the place. The huge climax at the end of the Pilaf Saga where Goku just transformed into this giant ape-like creature was really shocking to viewers who started with OG Dragon Ball instead of Dragon Ball Z. In hindsight, it was probably the fact that Toriyama made Goku have this transformation that eventually led to him coining up the entire Saiyan backstory. But even without knowing that Goku is a Saiyan survivor, this was still an incredibly shocking reveal to just experience out of the blue. This mostly being due to the fact that we learned earlier on in the story that Goku's adoptive grandfather was killed by a vicious beast that would appear on a full moon. The reveal that Goku was the one who ended his own grandfather's life without realizing he did it was the plot twist of the century back in the day. It was really crazy. Like, I just remember experiencing that for the first time and just being like, well damn, okay. So let's summarize all the points I've covered in this video to get a good overview for the, stuff discussed in this video. For the negative aspects I personally encountered while watching the Pilaf Saga, we have the story being pretty random and unplanned this early on in the franchise. The titular character the saga is named after does not really feel like he leads the saga. Admittedly, this is mostly due to a Funimation naming error, and the 80s and 90s gag humor was a personal point of dislike for me, like once again just not my type of humor for a series like Dragon Ball. And for the positive aspects I personally had with the Pilaf Saga, we have the Pilaf Saga starting off the incredible adventure of Dragon Ball we all know and love, us meeting the Dragon Team's iconic characters for the very first time and embarking on the journey together with them, us seeing the iconic Kamehameha wave for the very first time, and us getting the first real hints that Goku might not just be a weird earthling with a tail. So all in all, I am pretty positive for the Pilaf Saga in general. It had its fair share of faults, sure, but then again, you can't expect the beginning to an insanely long-spanning story like Dragon Ball to be completely planned out. The Pilaf Saga makes for a fun and easygoing beginning into the world of Dragon Ball. But this video was really just about my personal opinions and takes regarding this subject. I am much more curious to find out what all of you think about this saga, and I will see you next time when we will cover the 21st World Tournament saga in a similar format to today's video. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my videos. If you liked today's video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and leave a comment with your thoughts to help promote the channel in the YouTube algorithm. Work hard, study well and eat and sleep plenty, and I will see you all again in the next video. Peace out.